Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking to Dr. Manuel João Ramos, an associate professor at the Department of Anthropology at the University Institute of Lisbon, where he has been working for decades on questions of European colonialism and power in international relations. Manuel, welcome.
Pleasure to meet you, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you very much for coming online. You reached out because you actually have research done on the longue durée of European colonialism. And I've recently realized just how important it is that we keep talking about the impact, the modern day impact of Europe's colonial legacy, because the Europeans think, oh, this is long over. We're not colonial anymore. Well, can you maybe speak to that a little bit?
Yes, actually, I'm a weird anthropologist because part of my research is medieval studies. So you don't find many anthropologists doing medieval studies, but I focused part of my career in the study of this very strange and very powerful legend, the legend of Prester John of the Indies, which opened the stage or set the stage for the search and for the discoveries, the so-called discoveries in the 15th, 16th century. And it's a crusading legend that was developed in the court of Friedrich of the Hohenstaufens in Germany, and it is a very, very powerful ideological setup. I'm not an Hegelian necessarily, and I know that you have to look also at the material causes, but ideas are very, very powerful. And the idea of the remake of the Alexandrian idea of joining East and West and under one kingdom or one emperor is something that really filtered into this legend. This powerful king was also king of kings, was also a priest, a Christian priest that would ally with the West to conquer Jerusalem, and this idea is something that really fueled the Discoveries project, and as I said, set the stage for European expansion, and so set the stage for 500 years of development of an hegemonic, very, very powerful hegemonic machine, which, as we know, fully developed in the 19th century and during part of the 20th century, and when it started dismantling.
So you're seeing even current attempts of Western Europe to dominate the world at large, but especially what we call the Middle East, Western Asia, as still outgrowths of the Crusades? Is that
absolutely? I mean, if you look at what's happening in the Middle East, we're still in crusade. I mean, to an extent, we're still in a crusade. If you look at the rhetoric, at the discourses of especially in the United States, of what's called Christian Zionism, it is incredible. I mean, it's amazing that in the 21st century we are so overwhelmed with this Crusadist, millenarian, apocalyptical Christian discourse, which is very much alive today.
Can you maybe give us a couple of examples in what ways the discourse today reflects the crusading spirit of 500 years ago?
I mean, what I believe is that, as I said, all the pieces and all the discourse and the framework of understanding the world, of understanding the place of Europe in the world, was developed in the Middle Ages and flourished in the centuries afterwards. What is amazing for me is that the development of millenarism, the development of Utopian millenarism, especially from the 16th century onwards, and in the UK, in England, in the UK, this was very much a thing. Really, really developed into the 19th century Christian Zionism that afterwards traveled the ocean to the United States and created this notion that control of Jerusalem is the ultimate goal of European or of Western identity. And so that's what I'm saying. We're still in this crusading spirit.
But that never occurred to me, because the discourse about Zionism is so strongly focused on Judaism, but of course Judaism and Zionism are different concepts, but it's so strongly focused on that religious belief. But you're absolutely right that Christian Zionism is actually bigger. There's more Christian Zionists than
not only
Jewish
Zionists. It's bigger, yeah. Not only it's bigger, but it really precedes Jewish Zionism as a political as a political ideology. Precedes it for over more than a century. So in the 17th century, 18th century, that's the moment when Christian Zionism starts to develop in the UK and develops fully from the 1830s onwards in the UK, and then, as I said, travels to the United States. I found it very interesting, very recently. I mean, it's not the kind of thing that you do every day, but I read Theodor Herzl's diaries, and I was absolutely amazed at that his first plan was not to Zionism was not Theodor Herzl's first plan. His first plan was to convert Austrian and German Jews to Catholicism.
Yeah,
and he talked to the envoy of the Pope in Vienna, and he was dismissed. And so Zionism was a backup plan for Theodor Herzl, which is amazing. I think you have really to understand that Zionism is something that was developed in Europe and in the United States and precedes Jewish Zionism.
Yeah, and I mean,
and it's much more. I mean, there's much more, many more millions of Christian Zionism than there are Jewish Zionists, of course.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right that this the reason that these, especially the evangelical Christians in the United States, are describing themselves as Zionists is not because they want a home for the Jews. It's because they want to trigger the coming of the Christ,
exactly,
who will then eradicate the Jews and elevate the Christians to heaven. I mean, it's basically an end of the world cult.
Exactly. I mean, it's the Battle of Armageddon. That's what they are seeking. It's the Battle of the Armageddon.
But that you're connecting that with the ideas of the Crusade, then actually that opens quite a lot of doors, because it also explains why in current discourse we hear time and time again the idea of the Judeo-Christian tradition.
Exactly.
Does this, can you speak more about this connection between Judaism and Christianity within the context of the Crusades of 500 to 700 years ago?
I mean, it's a long story, but of course, it's very interesting that this letter, as I said, Prester John's letter, or the letter of Prester John, which is a fake. It's you could call it a false flag.
Yeah, I mean, can you tell us what it is? I actually don't know it.
Okay, this letter appeared in the. I mean, most probably it was forged by a bishop in the Hohenzollerns court as a false. I mean, maybe I'm using the word false flag anachronically, but as an incentive to the Third Crusade. The Third Crusade differs from the first two in as much that it was a very. I mean, it was let's say it was a very official crusade. There was Friedrich Frederick Barbarossa, there was the Richard Lionheart, there was the Dauphin de France. They all went to the Holy Land and they all died there. I mean, or on the way. But so this letter is a letter that comes that is supposedly written by this King of Kings, an Indian King of Kings, that addresses the West, proposing an alliance, a military alliance, to overrun the Ottomans or the Turks, the Seleucid Turks that are that took control of the Holy Land.
And this
letter,
the year is 1400.
No, it's I mean it's 12. It's the 12th century. We're in it's the mid 12th century. So
sorry, we are talking about
1140s. 1140s, 50s,
1140s, 1150s. The letter, this fake letter of John of
exactly. And this letter became an incredible bestseller. I mean, this letter is translated in most European languages. You find it in Hebrew, you find it in Russian, you find it in other Slavic languages, you find it in Greek, in Latin, in Old Scot, in Germanic, in Dutch, in English, in French, in Spanish, and more or later in Portuguese. And it was a letter that was everywhere in Europe. And as I said, it was a letter that was immensely powerful. It said, we can conquer Jerusalem because we have an ally on the other side of the world. And once we conquer Jerusalem, the prophecy of a whole, the Alexandrian prophecy, in a way, sort of is brought in, is transformed into a Christian prophecy. That is, then it'll mean the coming of the Lord in the last days. So it is, as I said, it is immensely powerful letter, and it proposes a golden age once Jerusalem is conquered.
You know, this is a
and it's the start. This letter, because of what happened in the Third Crusade, there was a lull, a moment of lull, but immediately after, or not immediately, 30-40 years after the Third Crusade, the Pope starts sending emissaries, travelers to the east in search of Prester John. So we have this start of the beginning of an immensely rich literary corpus of travel accounts of Westerners, of Europeans traveling to India, traveling to China, visiting the Mongols, and at the point that Marco Polo is also, he also talks about Prester John, and he says, well, Prester John, after all, I think is a subject of Genghis Khan, or Kublai Khan, and is Christian, but he's heretic. So I think there are actually Christians, better Christians in Eastern Africa. And he was probably talking about Ethiopians. And so from the 14th century onwards, the Indian Prester John becomes an Ethiopian Prester John, because Ethiopia was considered the third India. It was thought the Horn of Africa, in European views, was conceived as neighboring India. And so Prester John becomes Ethiopian. Hence, the Portuguese obsession to travel all around Africa and inside Africa in search of Prester John. So the explorations of the Portuguese throughout Africa were explorations in the search of Prester John. So every contact that they had with the Wolof, with the Congo, they were supposed to be kings that were subject to Prester John, because Prester John, like Jesus had 72 disciples, Prester John had 72 kings under him. So there was an image of Africa as having a political unity centered on an Ethiopian Prester John, a Christian Ethiopian Prester John. And then that was very much one of the goals of the Portuguese, reaching the Indian Ocean, reaching India, and trying to conquer and trying to control the Red Sea. Because that for them, sorry.
No, this is fascinating. So you're actually, I mean, you're making the case that Western colonialism started not primarily out of the drive to export excess population, but started out of the drive of this Christian Messianic idea of finally creating the alliance that can then take over the Holy Land. And one thing is interesting here, which is if we look at medieval maps of the world, usually what you find is Jesus Christ superimposed, and the heart is Jerusalem. So Europe was actually not at the heart of this map. It's Jerusalem that's at the heart, and you have the West.
And that's the so-called Yes, that's the so-called Dulendorf map, which disappeared. It's an amazing map that precisely has the face of Christ in the Far East. On the top of the map is the east, not the north. Is both hands are one hand is on the left. I mean, one hand is to the west, the other hand, sorry, one hand is to the north, the other hand is to the south, and the feet are to the west. And this says, if you look at that at this kind of maps, you really understand that the position of Europe was not. I mean, it was a position of total subalternity, facing the east. That is, it was the end of a process of degradation of mankind. So for Europeans, the redemption was traveling up to Jerusalem. Pilgrimage in Jerusalem meant the possibility of redress, a state of total degradation. This is really very, very powerful. And so the Crusades are an offshot of this movement of redemption. There's one element that I think is very important. Europe is in the bottom, but Africa is also in the bottom. The difference is that Europe is in the left side of in the right side of Christ, and Africa is in the left side of Christ. So
left is always bad, right is always right.
Exactly. And so that's why you find Africa totally completely populated by monstrous creatures and seen as a land of the devil in a way, and which of course you have to also consider that this image of the world, a three-part image of the world in the Middle Ages, is also an interpretation of the demographics of Noah. That is, the three sons of Noah populated the three regions of the world.
Yeah.
And so the sons of Cam are the Africans, which are bedeviled by they're cursed by God. So this is the conception. So when we talk about this, we're talking about, of course, a Judeo-Christian view of the world, where you have the Semites, you have the Japhetans or Europeans, and you have the Camites. And so what is interesting in this this evolving conceptualization is that you have, at a point, you have an Ethiopian Prester John.
And because can you tell me again his title?
Prester John. It's Presbyter Johannes.
Presbyterian. Okay, a Preston John.
Presbyter,
okay.
Because he was king, but he was also a presbyter. That was he was also a priest.
Okay. Believed to be that. And the thing is, originally
he was the lowest
from the east, or like Ethiopia was believed to be in the east, so from the head, right? So from above comes an offer of an alliance in order to ascend to the heart.
Exactly, because Ethiopia, or because the Gihon or the Nile was identified with the Gihon, which was one of the four rivers that flowed from heaven. From Eden, from paradise. So that part of Africa, the Horn of Africa, was conceived as totally different from the rest of Africa. Once because it was more recent than the rest, it was near India, and it was the place of the source of the River Nile. And Prester John, this Ethiopian king, controlled the waters of the River Nile.
Right.
And
Okay, so this within this worldview of medieval Europe, this makes perfect sense. Also considering that medieval Europe was a very, very dark, cold, nasty place, and this then informed a whole drive ever since the 1150s to basically find that guy and finally consummate that alliance. And then they started at the same time to do the Third Crusade, and these crusades were always extremely brutal affairs, and the goal was always to take Jerusalem.
Exactly. What is amazing? There one Portuguese admiral. So we have Vasco da Gama going to India, and then you have this very how can I say it? A very Crusadist admiral, Afonso de Albuquerque, who also became a viceroy, viceroy of Portuguese India, and he was in the side of the millenarians in the Portuguese court. That is, the Portuguese court, King Manuel's court, sort of balanced between, you could say, the globalists and the realists at that time. And so Vasco da Gama was a realist. I mean, when he reached India, he understood we cannot control this vast world. We can control points, ports, and we control the sea. And so basically, we'll tax and we'll control the trade, the Indian Ocean trade. But for the globalists or for the millenarians, such as Duarte Galvão or Afonso de Albuquerque, the issue was completely different. The obsession was to control Bab el Mandeb, control the Red Sea, and in order to reach Ethiopia. And he is very clear in his writings. Afonso de Albuquerque is absolutely clear. He was a megalomaniac, but he was also, as I say, an admiral of the Portuguese fleet, and he became the viceroy of India. So he was not a nobody. His project was to dry the Nile, that is, to divert the waters of the Nile to the Red Sea in order to dismantle the Mamelukes in Egypt, and then with the Ethiopian army land in Jeddah, get to Mecca, conquer Mecca, and then through the desert reach Jerusalem. This was the Portuguese plan in the early 16th century. So we're not talking about the Middle Ages anymore. We are already talking 16th century, and this was the Portuguese millenarian plan to conquer Jerusalem, which has a very interesting effect in the Ethiopians, because in the late 19th century, you have kings such as Theodoros in Ethiopia who still writes to Queen Victoria proposing an alliance to conquer Jerusalem. So this, as I say, it's a very powerful idea, and it's been with us Europeans for a long, long time. We've forgotten about the legend, but the concepts and the framework are totally there.
You know, I mean, thank you. You're just making Ursula von der Leyen look like a rational saint. I mean, no, it's mind-boggling just how insane the European drive to conquer and dominate the world has always been. And if in that reading of this longue durée, currently we're just in the Fourth Crusade, right? In a long stretch.
Or in the Seventh Crusade, because there were five crusades. So I'm probably the seventh, the Eighth Crusade. Yeah, I mean, it is a way. I think to understand the obsession of the British from the early 20th century with Palestine, you have to go back. You really have to go back to the 18th century, to the discussions in the UK around the Jews, the rights for the Jews in the 18th century, and the conceptualization, which is something that nowadays we also forget. But in the 19th century and up to the, I would say, up to the 1930s, the upper classes in the UK were Israelites. They had this conception that that the true Israelites were the British, the Anglo-Saxons, that the king was it was from the line of David.
Mm.
And so the so-called Anglo-Israelite, Anglo-Israelite Association was immensely powerful, especially among the upper classes and among the military from the 1850s to the 1930s in the UK, which is quite amazing. Of course, if you read Marc Bloch's book about the English and the French, I'm going back to the Middle Ages, the English and the French kings as being anointed and having thaumaturgic powers because they are kings like David. Mm-hmm. You start to see what the concept of power and the concept of royalty and sacrality in European power is. It is totally connected to this ideological framework, which is very, very ancient.
And can be this connection between, you know, the medieval belief of, you know, the necessity of conquering Jerusalem and the divine prophecy of conquering Jerusalem, and then this 300-year trajectory into what today became Zionism. And again, this Zionism goes back at least into the 19th century. But can we prove the handover of the staff from the Crusaders to the Zionists? Is that one? Can we show that?
I think, I mean, of course, you have to also understand the immensely complex situation of England of the Great Britain during the religious wars. Mm-hmm. The Anglicans, the Catholics, the Protestants, the various Protestants of
the Christian schisms.
Yeah, the various Christian isms, and it is in that very complex debate that millenarism pops up. The millenaries of the 18th century in the UK, they really pop up from this spot, this soup of debates. And millenarism was, as I said, the body that from which Christian Zionism came.
Can you millenarism? Can you speak a little bit more about that?
I mean, millenar. It is an idea of course of bringing about the millennium, bringing about the millennium, and bringing about as a perfect society, a republic, and a rational republic. So in a way, millenarism in the UK is joined at the hip with the Illuminism. So they're not. It's not very different. Millenarism. It's, you know, in a way, you look at people like Francis Bacon, who wrote the New Atlantis. I mean, New Atlantis. You know, it's an Illuminist vision, a rationalist Illuminist vision, but it's also a millenarist vision that is creating a utopia that in somehow brings about. So it's like almost a lay utopia that brings about all these religious ideas into being. You see, so in a way, the French Revolution, Rousseau. I mean, they just created a layer to a millenarian idea, so a millenarian apocalyptical idea which is very central to Christianity, of course.
So we're talking about the 18th century, about the Renaissance age, the idea of the illumination, as you said, right? Of rationality, of science, of the faculties of the mind taking over and bringing Europe out of dark ages of irrational belief into the modern scientific age. And you're saying like, no, even that one is heavily inspired by the whole idea of
Yes.
of getting to Christian utopia. And can you because I don't know about millennialism. I mean, can you tell
Well, I can give you an
means?
example, because you know, because the so-called the not so-called the Lisbon tsunami, the Lisbon earthquake and the tsunami, which became very they were popularized by Voltaire.
And the Lisbon earthquake of
1755
55 was huge. It flattened Lisbon, and it created the entire theodicy discussion in Europe about how come that God destroys a Christian city, and especially the beautiful churches. All of the churches gone. Is God real? Why? What?
Yeah,
this was huge.
And so and Voltaire says it's, you know, so if Voltaire is against this, and he proposes a rational, natural explanation for the. Well, what's interesting is that here in Lisbon we say we had two earthquakes. We had the natural earthquake, and then we had a human earthquake. And yes, the second earthquake was this Marquis, the Marquis of Pombal, was the prime minister of the king at the time, and he, because Lisbon was partly flattened, he flattened what was not flattened, in order to create a utopian, millenarian Lisbon, a rational grid Lisbon, because he had been, before the earthquake and before becoming prime minister, he had been the Portuguese ambassador to the UK, or to Great Britain, and he was immensely influenced by the British millenarians. So he brought British millenarianism into practice in Lisbon by flattening what hadn't been flattened, to create a perfect, rational Lisbon. I mean, this is a very interesting outcome of and a materialization of these ideas. So I think it's a good example.
They never, I mean, they didn't break the link, is what you're saying, right? Rationalism and these ideas of the 18th and 19th century of rationality and science never actually broke the link with the earlier ideas of creating creating heaven on earth. And central to that always was actually, in fact, going to Jerusalem.
Yeah, to a point. I mean, I'm discounting many things that happened in European debates, but I think this is a line that at least helps explain today's obsession. Because for me, you know, the Portuguese are we are in the tail of Europe, so we're the most Western, forgotten people in Europe, so to speak.
The sole of the feet.
We're the toe or whatever. But you know, and Portugal was neutral during the Second World War. So, and the war didn't come to Portugal, I mean, except in the form of spies and ambiguous relations with Germany, Spain, and the UK. But you know, but for me as a Portuguese, when I listen, when I read what's happening in Germany today, I mean, I find it absolutely amazing. Or in the UK, in relation to Israel and to the Israeli-Palestine conflict, I mean, and the genocide. I mean, it is, you know, it's bewildering for me. The discomfort, the incapacity of looking at reality. I'm not
No,
sure
I
I
agree.
explaining very well.
No,
I'm trying to
I agree with you, because for anyone who's not captured by the same mindset as these people are, it is absolutely clear that what we are seeing is a European population trying to exterminate a native population in a land which, I mean, it couldn't be much clearer that this is a settler colonial project. But the problem that I think you just illuminated, is that if we use settler colonialism in order to understand what's happening, we're not understanding the depth, the true depth of what's actually going on, that we're in the Seventh Crusade, and that this is a 1,000-year-old project.
Yeah, which is amazing. There's an element we also tend to forget this. The etymology of words, or the history of meanings. But when we talk about the discoveries, we use the word, we use the verb discover, to discover. I discovered this, you discover, we discovered this and that. What is to discover? The Portuguese word is descobrimento, which is basically the same as discovery. To discover, it's to uncover.
Yeah, take away the cover.
So to take away the cover, because the world is covered by darkness, and the Portuguese and the Spanish were at a mission designed by the Pope to uncover the world, that is, to project the light of Christ into everywhere where there was wilderness. So you cannot separate colonialism, the material and factual oppression of other peoples, from this early framework.
Yeah,
I mean, the 19th century colonialism, what was decided in Berlin, was the outcome of this project.
Yeah,
I mean, and so I understand. That that you have to be materialistic also, and that materialism as a place in historical explanation. But we shouldn't start. I think that's the big problem, is that we are binarists. I mean, that's the problem of Western Christianity, is binarism. And so we have either or this or that, this or that, this or that. Things are not
good or bad, light or darkness.
Exactly. You cannot have. In this case, what I'm saying is that you can have an eagle, and you can have a Marx, and maybe they're not that different. That is, if you, in order to understand history, you cannot just say, forget about materialism because history is moved by ideas, or forget about ideas because history is moved by working relations, by production relations. It is both. It is a fact that I'm more interested in the transformation of ideas than in the transformation of means of production, but they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so if we forget the power of ideas in the development of capitalism, and the development of imperialism, and the development of colonialism, we don't understand the reason for colonialism.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And there is a very, especially in the German historical tradition, there's a very strong so-called Ideengeschichte, the history of ideas, that recognizes the importance of figuring out the underlying motivations and drivers that can be divorced, or that are not similar, that are not equal to the material reasons given for what's happening. So if we try to understand colonialism as purely the outcome of excess population and the need to disperse and get wealth into the continent, we might miss exactly that point. That this was a nice side effect for the underlying motivation of let's go and live up to these very, very old ideas and myths and so on. And it's not that it's either or, it's both of them.
Exactly.
Is there something more to really understand here of this 1,000-year project, and why it is? I mean, why is it that we see time and time again the megalomaniacs actually becoming so goddamn powerful, who are clearly out of touch, who are clearly out of their minds, but they're constantly out of their minds, and they also carry forward that staff of ideals.
Yeah, of fantasies. I mean,
But very bloody fantasies, very bloody fantasies.
Exactly.
Why those people? Why not the rationalists? Why not you and I, who then say like, guys, look, this makes no sense.
Yes, I mean, I think as I mentioned, as you know, I published this piece in Mediapart, and the reactions have been mixed. Some people say yes, very interesting, but I've had all these reactions. Yes, but the others are also very bad, and we're not that bad. I mean, what I wrote was that there has been a structural asymmetry in the relations between the West and the rest, and we have to acknowledge this history of asymmetry and this history of monstrous hegemony. Go back, for instance, to the French Revolution. You have the revolution, the guillotine, the declaration of the rights of man and the citizen, and then you have Haiti, and because the slaves say, "Oh, okay, so we're all equal, we're all brothers, we all have freedom, so we want to be free."
And they were
that didn't go very well.
The first successful slave revolts that actually managed to out with the French.
Yes, but Napoleon, well, it was one of his first acts was to send the army to quell the rebellion, because you can be free and equal, but only if you're a Westerner. And that's so it's a very interesting early problem of democracy and European values and human rights values, that they're all very fine as long as it's only for us.
Yeah, and this theme repeats time and again when the Europeans declare universal values, and we find out that the universe only applies to white Europeans.
Exactly, and that's why I published this piece, because we have to look ourselves in the mirror of history, be it earlier, recent history or not so recent history. We have to be aware of what we are and what we've been, so that we understand how people from out of Europe see us. They don't see us as very generous and sympathetic, nice people, and that is the problem.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that the Europeans, especially the Europeans, and not even like the emigrated Europeans like the Americans, but especially the Europeans that remain in Europe, are really unaware, and I include my native Switzerland, unaware just of how grotesque that history was and how it still impacts the way that obviously anyone in Africa or in Asia or in South America views the Europeans. It's the sheer size of ignorance about what this does is quite astonishing, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, I'm not a practitioner of wokeism at all. I mean, no. And that's not my line. You see, I mean, we have to devolve. I mean, this is political correctness that I'm not interested in. I'm interested in understanding and discussing and debating what is European identity in the world, in today's world. And the European identity in today's world cannot do away with European and Western identities from before, because they are the ones who have impacted the relation of today's Europeans with the world. And what I see everywhere when I go, because I travel quite a lot in Africa, is a total disconnect between Europeans or Westerners and Africans, because we do believe that we are all missionaries, that we are still preaching development, we are preaching goodness everywhere in the world, and we don't see, or many people don't see, that this posture is not credible in African eyes.
And I think we didn't even talk about that yet, because you travel a lot to Ethiopia as an anthropologist. You work in the field. You try to understand local societies and so on. And that's even a separate topic. That's also super interesting. But this also one of the things we need to be aware is that the Europeans are still doing exactly what you're saying, right? Even though they're not going there with the holy book anymore. They still go.
But they are going
telling
with
them you
new
should be more
books.
like us.
Yes, but then they're going with new books. As a researcher, I know very well that today you can only, you're more likely to get your application through and get financing if you focus on gay rights, on women's rights, on LGBT rights, because in African studies, because that's where the money goes to do research, because there is an agenda, there's a political agenda, of course, which is to make Africans be more like us.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of what my Ugandan friend told me 10 years ago. He looked at me and he said in a very particular way of phrasing things. He said, like, you guys, first you come to Africa and you tell us to love the book and kill the gays. And now you tell us to love the gays and burn the book. Can you please make up your mind?
Yeah.
Like this frustration. Jesus.
Exactly, and we don't see the ridiculousness of our position. That is the problem. You see, that is the problem. I was here. That was 2 years ago, I think. I mean, yeah, there was the special envoy of the European Union to the Horn of Africa. She came. She's German. She came to Lisbon. She wanted to contact also academics interested in the Horn of Africa. I was there with some colleagues in a meeting, and she was. I mean, I know that when you're a German and you speak English, you tend to especially if you're not too familiar with English, sometimes you use the imperative a bit too much, and so she was a bit. Maybe I'm half joking, but anyway, she was saying that she had been in Somalia, she had been in Sudan, she hadn't been in Ethiopia, because by then Europeans are more or less persona non grata in Ethiopia. But she was saying, yes, I was with the government and the official, and saying, you should do this and you should do that and you should do this in order to this and that. And she said, but they don't understand. They didn't understand what our position. And I said, well, maybe they don't want to understand the position of someone who uses the imperative, and maybe they will understand better the position of a special envoy of the European Union to the Horn of Africa, when there's a special envoy of the Horn of Africa to the European Union to explain the problems of the Basque, or of the Catalans, or the Belgians and the Flemish and the Wallon and the when Africans start saying, yes, maybe you should do this and you should do that, then you'll have a more equal and you can be recede, and you can have a debate. But if you're using the imperative and saying you should do this and you should do that, they just shrug their shoulders, of course. And today in Africa, people shrug their shoulders because they have different partners. They have the Chinese, they have the Turks, they have the Arabs, they have the Brazilians, they have a whole new world of possible partnerships, and Europeans have no means and no intellectual means today to 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 understand that they are not important anymore.
Yeah,
Which is very sad, because Europeans still think that they are important in Africa, but they are not. Usually they are not, and they don't want to face it. So this sorry.
I'm glad they're not. On the other hand, I'm actually quite sad for Europe, and I do think that one of the favors that for instance Africa could do us would be to actually try to send a special envoy from the Horn of Africa to talk to us and give us their analysis of what the Europeans should do in order to help us to finally get to grips with ourselves, because it seems that we are internally utterly incapable of doing that, even though we have these discourses, right? But they never bubble up. They never
Exactly.
They barely scratch the surface.
Exactly, and I think there's Africa is today a young continent, and it's the youngest continent in the world. That is, the population is very young.
Yeah.
The population and the countries have a potential for development that is almost unparalleled in the world today. So it is, you can say Africa is the continent of the future. It's the continent of the 21st century.
Yes.
It will, develop. The development is tragic. I mean, I know Ethiopia for 25 years, and I've seen the ravages of development. I know, but it's there, and it's not going to be stopped because we're nostalgic about a nice African villages and the nice people on horseback or in mules or whatever, and so Europe has to reappraise our relationship with Africa, because we cannot keep on talking about the dangers of migration and the invasion, because that's not going to lead anywhere. That's why I started my text with Joseph Borrell's words. I mean, for me, it is amazing that someone can conceive in 2022 can say that we live in a garden, and this garden must be preserved because there's the risk of we being invaded by the jungle. I mean, this is not naive words. These words they carry immense weight. The garden, the jungle. I mean, it's just a new manifestation of the Ullendorf map of the 14th century. The Kemites coming to invade the nice garden of the Europeans. I mean, what is this? How can we understand our position in the world if we're still using this kind of framework? I'm not a globalist. I'm not praising the idea that everyone migrates everywhere. And when we have also to understand that the peak of migration in proportion is not the 20th century or the 21st century. It was the late 19th century. That's when, in proportion to the population, that's when most people migrated. And the most people that migrated, well, they were Europeans. They migrated everywhere in the late 19th century.
And they genocided 3 continents. I mean, the North American continent, people would have a different skin color today if it wasn't for the genocide that we Europeans committed on them, and then also used for slave labor to bring yet another population that didn't even want to leave over there.
Exactly.
And that we today complain about, well, okay, let's not go into this because it opens a whole different door. But Manuel, this was a fascinating talk. Thank you very much for embedding many of the symptoms of mass violence that we're seeing today in a much larger picture. I think that's a very important framing as well. People who want to read more from you or read more of your analysis, where should they go?
Well, I have a website. It's not a very good website. Maybe you can put it in somewhere in the comments. It's mjr.link. There I've got most of my publications are there. some of the things that I do.
Okay, I will put the link to that content
link
in the
in the-
description of this video below. Manuel João Ramos, thank you very much for your time today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me. Bye-bye.